What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is going to be joining me in just a minute to do our Fouled Out mock draft. There's no big mega mock this year with other podcasts. It's a lot of planning that goes into that, and that's a little bit harder to do nowadays. So, just Matt and I going over our mock that we did earlier this week. We're also going to talk about some of the rumors coming out about the first round of the draft, which is going to be taking place later today. If you're listening to this on a Thursday, and get you guys ready for the last pre-draft podcast. And then we'll be back next week breaking down the draft and weeks after that, going back to the NBA playoffs. So lots of good stuff coming up. But today we are getting ready for the NFL draft. So let's go. All right, Matt is here. I have to start off the top of the podcast by apologizing. The Boston Bruins are playing in Game 5 of their series, first round series against the Florida Panthers right now. So if you hear like random screeching or yelling in the background of this podcast, it's because I have the Bruins on my second screen. But Matt, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. I'm excited.
Ready for tomorrow is Christmas. Honestly, like it feels
Oh
like
yeah.
feels like Christmas Eve. It's Wednesday right now. This podcast is going to come out on the morning of the NFL draft, or at least the morning of the first round of the NFL draft. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to start picking some players. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like as fun as the intrigue has been this year leading up to it, because it has been the most wild speculation I've ever seen for any draft ever in 33 years. But I'm ready to just fucking know something. I want to know one single thing other than the fact that Will Levis is going number one.
Yeah, kind of crazy. There was a rumor that came out
Yeah.
yesterday on Reddit that
Mhm.
the Panthers had told Will Levis that he was going to be the first overall pick, and that Will Levis had started telling his friends and family he was going number one overall. It was kind of just like a meme until his odds to go number one overall dropped from plus 4,000 to plus 400 in the matter of like an
Yeah.
hour. And that doesn't guarantee anything, but I think it does kind of show that Vegas is just reacting to things almost
Yep.
the same way we are right now. And that teams have, I don't know if it's that teams have done like an elite job of smoke screening this year, or if the draft is just so like the grades on guys are just so different. But I feel like every
So
team in the top 10, there's like rumors that they are interested in three different players, like
mhm.
including Carolina at number one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit that teams just have very different grades on very different players. I was listening to Brett Coleman earlier today, and he used to work for NFL Network, so he's got a little bit of ties uh, to a lot of different people. And he was saying that he's been told by pretty reliable sources that like Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Miles Murphy, Nolan Smith, all four of those guys for any team, they could be in any order and are in any order. And like you could very easily see any one of them go first, depending on that team's grading system. Now, I'm going to say, based on the teams up top, there's one or two that is possible. But I mean, I would not be surprised if someone like Nolan Smith or Miles Murphy that is expected to go in the bottom half or at least like outside the top 10 ends up going in the top 10 just based off of that.
There was a report earlier this week where the writer said that if you don't have 15, like if you have 15 first round grades on
Yeah.
guys in a draft, that it's a bad draft, and that certain scouts don't even have 15 first round grades on guys in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
and different teams have like 10 to 15 first round grades on guys, but it could be 15 completely different guys depending on what team you're talking to. So
Yeah.
we talked about this a little bit earlier today where there's probably going to be a team in the top 10 who picks somebody and is like celebrating because they're like, oh my God, we can't
Yeah.
believe that we got Nolan Smith at 8. And another team is looking at them like, I didn't even have that. I didn't have that guy until like day 2.
Yeah.
So it's the opinions after the draft are going to be wild. And I feel like we're going to see
Yeah.
picks that we just totally do not expect, like picks
Yeah.
just completely out of left field.
It would make a lot of sense for a team like the Lions to have a really, really high grade on someone like Darnell Wright because they run a lot of power running schemes. They run a lot of gap scheme in the running game. But if you look at someone like, San Francisco that runs a lot of wide zone, there's much better offensive tackles in this class for that. And I think that's a lot of where that comes from. If you're a team that plays a ton of press man, I'm sorry, but Christian Gonzalez is not your guy. If you run a lot of zone, yeah, great. Like he's probably the first cornerback on your board.
We saw that in the mock draft that we did
Yep.
together this week, where it's like guys like, I don't want to spoil the picks, but someone like Christian Gonzalez, who is kind of a consensus like top 15 guy
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of places right now. We didn't even have a spot for him until later in the first round.
Yeah.
And like he might have gone too late in ours, but like also it's like there's all these teams could make so many different picks. Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
like every pick I made in this mock, I had to consider like 4 or 5 guys for almost every single spot.
Could never live with the stress of being a GM.
I think the money helps. I would say the money helps relieve a lot of that stress. But
I would look significantly more like Charlie Kelly, and it's always sunny in Philadelphia.
with all that said, Matt and I did play GM this week.
We did.
Uh, we did our own mock draft of what we would do. So we're going to go through the picks. We'll go through like some of the buzz surrounding these picks right now.
Mm-hmm.
The rules of the mock were that the teams were not allowed to trade and you had to pick who you would pick. So this is not predictive of what's going to happen Thursday night. This is just what we would do. I think anybody doing a predictive mock right now is out of their mind. Like I feel like people are just going to be so off base this year. So it's just much easier to say like, okay, what would we do? Who do we think the right pick is?
Yeah.
And then just to see like how crazy Thursday night is going to be. I think it's going to be a
Yeah.
really hard draft to predict with all the variables that we talked about. But
Yeah.
let's get into what we did.
Let's go.
You're up first with the Carolina Panthers.
I went with the chalk. Carolina has done a decent job over the years of accumulating some talent on the defensive side of the ball. They got Ike Ekwonu last year to be their bookend tackle. They brought in some guys in free agency to be weapons. Like quarterback's really been the spot that they cannot nail down. It just makes sense to pick the guy that does all the quarterback things the best out of all the guys in this draft. And that is easily Bryce Young. I mean, I think this is easy money here.
Yeah, I think it's the right pick. I don't think Carolina is trading all the way up to first to not take their quarterback of the future. Although
Yeah.
Carolina trading up to first is starting to remind me of when San Francisco traded up and ended up taking Trey Lance,
Mm-hmm.
where you trade up and all of a sudden there's all these rumors of like, it turns out they didn't really know who they wanted. They just wanted to be in position to have
That's
the guy they want.
that's kind of what I think happened. But I am inclined to believe that they are going to just go the chalky route, which I think is the right route right now.
Yeah, he's the number one quarterback on both of our boards. We ranked him number one. I think it's the right pick. I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
100% convinced it's the actual pick.
Yep.
There's all this buzz about Levis. I think that Stroud's not completely out of the picture because when they first traded up, all the
Mm-hmm.
buzz was about Stroud.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see what they do on Thursday. I was up next with Houston Texans picking second. I also went kind of chalk and went Will Anderson with this pick. I think, we talked about Jalen Petrie and how many tackles he had to make last season because the defense in front of him is so bad.
Yeah.
They desperately need to get talent on that defense, and getting a guy who, honestly, like if he was draft eligible last year, would have pushed to be the number one overall pick in last year's draft
Mm-hmm.
with how high he was on people's boards. He had a little bit of a rough season this year, but if you think that he's that same dude from last year, or you think he's closer to that, then he's easily the best edge rusher in this class. So I like that pick for the Texans.
I think I've mentioned on the podcast before that I'm a little disappointed in the drop off in his game from a year ago to this past year. But a lot of that was also kind of paired up with him putting on a little bit extra weight and playing a little bit further inside. I think he played a lot of 4i and a lot of 5 tech this year, which if you're taking him at number 2 overall, you better be putting him at 7 tech or wide 9. Get him out in space and let him just speed rush the entire game.
Yeah, I would take that. For what it's worth, I think Houston trades out of this pick and let somebody come up and get a quarterback. But since we couldn't trade, that was the pick. Matt, where are we going at number 3?
I am actually taking at number 3 the guy that I expect to go number 2. Um, 'Cause I just don't know that Houston is necessarily going to get the value that they want there. But who knows? We're hearing all sorts of crazy shit. So with Arizona needing to stay here, I'm going with the best D lineman sitting here left on the board, and Tyree Wilson. He can play pretty much anywhere from 3 tech to wide 9. He's got size, speed, strength. My one kind of knock on his athleticism is that he's not necessarily the twitchiest guy, but I mean, you watch his tape and it has never really been an issue. So, I mean, he just is able to generate so much power, combining that with the speed that he has, especially when he gets out wider in the formation. I mean, the power that he's able to generate is pretty intense. For what it's worth, I do not expect Arizona to pick here because they know they're going to suck this year without Kyler Murray, and they need picks. I absolutely expect them to take whatever they can get out of here, and just try to be ready for the following season.
It's kind of funny. The latest rumor surrounding the Cardinals picking at 3 is that Kyler wants Paris Johnson
Yep.
as the offensive tackle from Ohio State. So Paris Johnson Jr.'s odds to be picked 3rd overall have like nosedived or skyrocketed, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I would listen to Kyler Murray right now, even if he was healthy.
Yeah.
If I'm the Cardinals, I don't know that I'm doing things just because Kyler Murray wants me to at this point.
The guy that doesn't watch film?
The guy who's busy playing COD, he's like, dude, Paris Johnson Jr. is so good at Call of Duty. We need him on this team. Let's go. Picking 4th, we have the Colts. The Colts are going to pick a quarterback. I think that they're going to try to trade up, whether it's to 2 or whether it's like they do what the Bears did and trade up 1 spot to get their guy. For what it's worth, I think their guy is Will Levis. I think we easily see them trade to 2 or to 3 and try to take Will Levis. But we're picking my guy, and my guy
Our
is
guy.
our guy is Anthony Richardson, the quarterback from Florida. We talked about this last week. You're starting to see that like his stock is going down in the draft, and people are saying like, oh man, he's not going to be a top 10. He's not top 15. He might not even be in the first round at this point. I just think the upside is too tantalizing. And I think that there's a lot of smoke screens of like people trying to knock his value right now so that they can get him maybe a little bit later and not have to trade up for him. But I don't think you can look at what this guy can do on a football field and say that he doesn't have the highest ceiling of any player in this draft. And I'm going to take the risk on that if I'm looking for my franchise quarterback.
The dude got significantly better as the year went on, and he really wasn't making the same mistakes twice. He's incredibly smart. He's just extremely inexperienced. Yeah, if you can get the highest upside player in the entire draft at number 4, you do it.
Yeah, it's a solid pick. But all right, who'd you have Seattle taking at 5?
If you listen to our quarterback episode, this probably feels sacrilegious for me to say. But I had the Seattle Sea Chickens taking CJ Stroud.
Hendon Hooker. Tanner McKee.
And this is me making this decision from the standpoint of I'm the GM. I'm going to be with this team beyond Pete Carroll. Even with like, hey, if Gino continues to progress, then like you're not going to be in this position again. But Gino's already like 30, maybe even older. This is your chance to get a quarterback of the future, and you can get out of Gino's deal pretty easily. I don't see a reason as the GM to not get your quarterback of the future.
I feel like this could easily be reminiscent of when Seattle paid Matt Flynn all that money to come be their quarterback. You remember that? He threw like 6 touchdowns against the Lions in the finale of the season. Seattle paid him a ton and then drafted Russell Wilson. And they're just like, we're going to go with Wilson. They just wasted all this money. That's what Stroud being drafted by Seattle and starting right away would be like, because they just gave Gino a new contract and they're just like, I mean, obviously honestly, it worked out for him the first time. So I like this spot for Stroud too, because I mentioned this earlier. I think if he's like the first quarterback off the board, he has a big head and he has like kind of attitude problems and he kind of thinks he's the shit. If he's the third quarterback off the board, not only are we rich because we bet on that, but also he has a chip on his shoulder and he has to start grinding. So I like the spot for him.
Yeah, if he takes the right message from it, that's my concern with him is that I don't know if he will ever take the right message from things. But we don't talk to these guys. We'll never know that until we actually see the results. So
yeah, I mean, he could end up like Josh Rosen, and on draft night, he's just like, they're like 14 teams passed on you, and he's like, 14 teams made a mistake. It turns out that the only team that made a mistake was the Cardinals, picking him at 15. Is he's
me for believing in him?
Yeah, is he out of the league at this point?
Oh, I would hope so.
God, he was on like 7 teams on his rookie deal, and then he's out of the league.
That's what I was gonna tell you. You want to take a quick tangent? Did you know that Vic Beasley is in the XFL now?
Yes.
Do you want to know how many sacks Vic Beasley has had in his 7 games in the XFL?
It's either a lot or a little. I'm going to go with 0.
You are shockingly close. It's 0.5.
Woo! Vic Beasley.
This man was an all-pro in the NFL.
Life comes at you fast, man. Yeah, he had like 18 sacks or something like that.
Yeah,
The 1 year with the Falcons. This is the story of the entire Falcons team that
yeah.
was coincidentally, I don't know if you all know this, but this Falcons team was up 28-3 in
Oh
the
my
Super
God.
Bowl and blew it. And pretty much like from the moment they blew the 28-3 lead to the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady and the Patriots in the Super Bowl, it was straight downhill for every single person on that team. Like Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, obviously Vic Beasley, you name it, like every single guy on that team. I'm not
Yeah,
even joking. It like ruined all of their careers from that point forward. It's actually kind of amazing.
yeah. Dan Quinn's the only one that's had any sort of bounce back.
Yeah, and it like
Yeah, mostly came
decent
with
bounce back, not
like,
fantastic.
I mean, he's back to being a respected defensive coordinator,
Well,
but
I would say the person who had the best recovery from that was Kyle Shanahan.
that's true. Yeah,
But like it's pretty much everybody that was there the next
yeah.
year
Oh
straight
yeah,
downhill. Devontae
yep,
Freeman,
yeah,
who was the other running back? Tevin Coleman,
yeah. Anyone who
Julio
stuck
Jones,
around,
Mohamed Sanu, everybody.
yeah,
It was awful.
yeah. If you
Uh,
stuck around, like it was over.
yeah, thank you for that tangent. I'm very happy that we talked about Vic Beasley. Also, hilariously, Caleb Ellaby, former Western Michigan quarterback who should have stayed at least like one more year, but probably two more
Yep.
years, is in the XFL as like a third string QB after leaving
Yeah,
early to go to the NFL. Awful, awful decisions all around.
yeah. So never get too full of yourself.
Nope. So with the sixth pick, somehow this lined up that I had like both Lions picks and the Patriots pick. So I got to like
Yeah,
pick for all the hometown teams, but we kind of danced around that later.
yeah,
But I did make this pick for the Lions, and I picked Illinois cornerback Devin Weatherspoon. It's an obvious need for the Lions. I
yep,
felt like this was a really easy pick. And this is
yeah.
if I was going to do a predictive mock, this would be like the first pick I got to, and I would be like, okay, I'm confident in who's going to go here.
Hmm.
Um, he's the best corner in this draft, especially with the way the Lions want to play, like taking a bite out of people's
Yeah.
kneecaps. I love the attitude for Detroit, so I think this is a slam dunk.
Getting the best press man corner in the draft as a press man team really like ramps up what you can do coverage wise. So Adam had my consent on this one. So I still think that if Anthony Richardson is here, like that has to be the pick. But
Yeah, I like it from a need perspective. I like it from a fit perspective, and I really like it from a culture perspective because
yep.
we talked about him on our My Guys podcast because he was one of your guys.
Hmm.
He's like that dude on the outside. So I like it. But
Yeah.
all right, where is Vegas going at 7?
Their offensive line has been a mess for years. The top of the offensive tackle class for this group, for this draft, is actually very strong. Beyond that, it's just terrible. Like it is a very, very shallow class overall. So you need to get your offensive tackles when you can, and that's in the first round. uh, so I went with my top offensive tackle uh, in Darnell Wright. He has extremely long arms. He has shut down multiple high level pass rushers from this draft class. And he's played both left and right tackle. So he can be moved around to whatever Vegas feels like is best for their team in his rookie year. In all likelihood, eventually probably shifting over to left tackle.
Yeah, I don't like this pick because I'm hoping that Darnell Wright is there when my team is picking because he's someone that I would like to have. But
Yeah.
we made out pretty good in this draft. So I had Atlanta at 8, and this was a pick where honestly I could have gone so many different directions.
Yep.
I thought about Jackson Smith and Jigba here. I just struggled with it because they've spent a top 10 pick on a pass catcher each of the last two drafts with
Mm-hmm.
Pitts in London. And it's like, okay, yeah, if JSN works out and Pitts kind of comes into his own a little bit,
Yeah.
then that's a pretty ferocious pass catching room with the three of those guys moving forward. There's some rumors about them taking Bijan Robinson
Mm-hmm.
to play in Arthur Smith's offense, who, if you don't know, he was the OC in Tennessee for a long time with Derrick Henry. But I like what they have there with Algier and Patterson. So I wouldn't I mean, spoiler alert, no running backs are going in this mock. I'm just going to tell you guys that right now because neither Matt or I would do a running back in a mock draft. I ended up going with Lucas Van Ness, the edge from Iowa. He's the third edge on my board. I think a lot of people actually like have him lower because people like Miles Murphy and Nolan Smith and a couple other guys more than him.
Mm-hmm.
That Iowa defense was so good last year. I mean, it was like the only bright spot for
He
Iowa.
didn't even start.
And he didn't even start on the defense. So,
Yeah.
I actually think he could be a really good. He kind of reminds me of like a Rob Ninkovich type of guy, where it's
Okay.
like it's not going to be super flashy. It's not going to be like tons of highlight reel stuff, but it's going to be really good and really
Yeah.
solid, like always in the right position, making the right choices kind of guy,
Yeah.
but not like a double-digit sack guy every season. He's like a Rob
Yeah.
Ninkovich or like a George Karlaftis from last season. That gets he's
Yeah.
more of like an effort player. And I like that for
Mhm.
a defense that needs a little bit of
Yeah.
culture.
Well, and I'm saying this not from like the aspect of how good I think he will be, but just like the style and mentality with which he plays. He just looks like a long lost Watt brother. You know, just just all effort all the time. It's got a bit of speed in there. He's actually faster than you'd think. But just hits you hard in the mouth every time.
I like it. So, all right, now we got Chicago at 9.
This is not what I want to happen, but I have Chicago actually taking care of their quarterback, which it sounds like they don't necessarily want to do. I have Chicago taking offensive tackle Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. He's a very, very polished pass protector, and that is first and foremost for Chicago right now. I understand that they probably really want to have a good, strong running game. And, I would say Johnson is actually pretty adept at more of like a zone blocking scheme. So it's not like he's not a positive there. They cannot afford to have another year of the level of porous offensive lines that Justin Fields has dealt with for the last 2 years. Because while I was never a big Justin Fields guy, there's no coming back from 3 years in a row to start your career of dealing with that.
Yeah, it's absolutely the right pick at this point with how bad the offensive line was in Chicago last season.
Yeah. And I was real tempted to take JSN. Don't get me wrong, because I mean the next best way to help him is give him pass catchers. But
yeah, with the acquisition of
giving
Moore, though, it's not as pressing to get more pass catchers in that room.
It's not as pressing, but
I think that like Moore, Mooney, and Komet's not a bad pass catching room. I've seen worse pass catching rooms.
I have
in the
as
last
well.
couple of seasons.
Yes.
So
I would still say it's not above average.
No. But so I had Philly at 10, and I think I would probably get some flack for this pick because maybe people are going to think it's a little early. But I went with Brian Branch, DB out of Alabama. One of my guys, one of the guys that you agreed on with me.
Yeah.
Philly lost a lot on defense this offseason, both starting linebackers, a couple starting DBs. The defensive line is still pretty solid, but I feel like they got to rebuild on that side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that Brian Branch is like a perfect replacement for CJ Gardner Johnson, who left and went to the Lions.
Yep.
So he's going to be all over the place. He's going to be around the line of scrimmage. Like, I think a really nice piece for a team that will use him creatively. You have Tennessee at 11.
Tennessee has been committing football malpractice at the wide receiver position really ever since they traded AJ Brown. It's only a year, but it was pretty apparent all year long.
It was a bad year.
It was
a
real
really bad year.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan Tannehill clearly struggled with that loss before he was hurt. And then he was injured all year. And then they, had a rookie in Josh Dobbs deal with that kind of receiving core after Ryan Tannehill could no longer play. Like, you can't have that happen again. My best solution to that is pairing Treylon Burks with Jackson Smith and Jigba, if I can say words. From Ohio State. I would say he's easily wide receiver 1 in this class. And while he doesn't necessarily have the best long speed, his short area quickness, which is where you create separation, is elite. It's elite among the elites. He is going to be an immediate target monster in the NFL.
I like JSN and Treylon Burks as a combo for what Tennessee wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Derrick Henry's still there for now. They obviously want to run the ball a lot, and then like quick game passing, play action passing. The Burke skill set is more of like a diet AJ Brown, catch the ball, yards after catch, like very physical receiver.
Yeah.
Whereas JSN, like you said, is going to be like an elite quickness guy, going to be open in the quick game. He's going to have those like RPO plays. He's going to be open a lot. Like I like the combo. So I could see it. There's a lot of rumors about them trading Derrick Henry right now too.
Jeez.
Although I don't know if he goes for a first, but like Philly's a team that's interested in him. So that would be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I have Houston at 12, and we've let Jalen Carter fall probably too far here.
Yeah.
So I'm going Jalen Carter, the defensive lineman from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
They took Will Anderson at 2 in this mock. If you get Will Anderson and Jalen Carter and they both hit, I feel like you've won the draft.
Yep.
At that point. And we talked about how bad that defense was in front of Jalen Petrie last season.
Oh, yeah.
You want to make the defense better, adding 2 potential superstars to your defensive line, or like, a superstar pass rusher and a superstar defensive lineman. That defense is going to look way different. And I honestly think the biggest problem with them getting Will Anderson and Jalen Carter in this draft is that it may prevent them from tanking for Caleb Williams next season.
So
the defense might be too good.
They have Cleveland's first again next year, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's actually the case for a while. I mean, they're going to be bad regardless.
They're going to be bad, but like if those 2 guys hit as rookies, then that's probably good for like an extra 2 or 3 wins.
I mean, obviously, like I've talked about this before, like if the teams up top need a quarterback, then it really doesn't matter. But when you got that extra pick, it's a lot easier to trade up and go get that quarterback. But odds are that the team that has the number one pick is going to be in the market for a quarterback, or at least upgrading their quarterback situation, because every NFL GM is in love with Caleb Williams.
I am also in love with Caleb Williams, and I'm not afraid to admit it. So while I got to pick for all the teams that we like, you got to pick for all the teams that we don't like.
Yes, this was
Starting
painful.
with Green Bay at 13.
For Green Bay, I spitefully went out and immediately got them a wide receiver. Another thing that I considered and could have done was going offensive tackle here, because after this season, I believe that they could save like 21 million by cutting Bakhtiari, who's been having a lot of health stuff. Um, he has not been on the field nearly as often as he should be for someone who's paid what he is paid. Um, and I could very much see them letting him go next year. That being said, it's hard to imagine next year's draft class not being deeper at offensive tackle. So I figured he might as well roll forward this year with Bakhtiari and deal with that problem, knowing that that's going to happen, and get Jordan Love a weapon. So I chose Jordan Addison from USC. I like that he was at least semi-successful in a different offense than he was in Pittsburgh. Like, it shows that it wasn't just the offense. It wasn't Kenny Pickett. Like, he's a good, competent wide receiver. And I'm also more inclined to believe that he is probably more close to the Pitt Jordan Addison than he is the USC, because I don't think that USC was really utilizing his strengths to the best of his capabilities.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I like seeing him be successful in multiple offenses, but
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, it's not just Kenny Pickett, but then he also went to Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Who we just talked about. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's not like he was successful with like a scrub.
Yeah, maybe the quarterbacks wasn't the best example, but yeah.
Yeah. So I like the pick. If Green Bay finally takes a first round receiver now that Aaron Rodgers is gone, it'll be the funniest thing I've ever seen ever since that one guy turned himself into a pickle. Funniest thing ever. Wouldn't believe he turned himself into a pickle, man. So I'm thrilled here because I'm picking for the Patriots at 14. When we first did the mock, the Jets and Green Bay hadn't swapped picks in the Aaron Rodgers trade yet. So we actually had Peter Skoronski going to the Jets right in front of the Patriots.
Okay, and you got to say it with the accent, though.
Peter Skoronski over here. So we had Skoronski going to the Jets. And I was like, I had to take Broderick Jones for the Pats because, like, there are a lot of things I want to do here. I would love to get Zay Flowers here. I'd love to like take like a Christian Gonzalez or like a Nolan Smith, or like there's a lot of good options for them until you realize that if the season started today, they'd be starting Riley Reef at right tackle. So offensive line, no, offensive line has to be the pick here. Yeah. It's not the flashiest, but it's good. And if you get in Skoronski, then I'm happy because he's the top rated tackle on my board. And I think he's going to be really good. I think he could plug in at right tackle right away this season. And if you have injuries on your offensive line, he could play guard this season as well. And you can kind of move pieces around with him because he's flexible. And then after our left tackle, Trent Brown, leaves, he can swing over there in a couple of years as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, having that versatility there is really important. I mean, with injuries, you never know what you're going to have left on your roster. If you've got a more capable backup tackle, but you need someone to play guard and you just don't have shit left, to get your best five on the field, you may have to slide him in. And having someone that can actually do that is really important.
You're up with the Jets at 15 now that they've swapped picks with the Packers.
They got to take care of Aaron Rodgers if this is going to work, which it's not going to work. But um, so I went with offensive tackle. It doesn't seem like they're super enthused about Mekhi Becton. So I took Broderick Jones. I think he's one of the most like naturally physically gifted tackles in this class.
I like it. Yeah, this is where the tackle starts getting really thin.
Yep.
I'm a little iffy on Broderick Jones, but then after that, it's like, oof. So I had the Washington at 16, and I I had to go Will Levis here. We let
Yep.
Levis get all the way down to 16. He likely doesn't escape the top 10 in this draft, and maybe Washington could trade up, but I'm not a Sam Howell believer. I know there's been some reports that they're kind of high on him, but Washington's been struggling at quarterback like pretty much since RG3 hurt his knee.
Yeah.
They had Kirk Cousins for a couple seasons. He leaves. And then it's just been Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
It's been a shit show there. So I'm not super high on Will Levis, but I would 100% take the risk on him at 16.
It really just comes down to your quarterback evaluation, but like at some point they got to have a solution, and I don't really know that Sam Howell is it. Will Levis has all the talent in the world. At a certain point, you just got to throw a dart.
Yeah, I'm taking the swing here.
Yeah.
So you actually made the next two picks because we
Yeah.
fiddled around so you can make one for Detroit. But first you had Pittsburgh at 17.
I mean, I think that if Pittsburgh is picking at 17 and Joey Porter Jr. is on the board and they don't take him, the entire city of Pittsburgh will burn down. I took the cornerback from Penn State, super long arms, super physical, just loves beating up receivers.
I really like Joey Porter Jr. I kind of wanted to take him with the Pats pick, specifically to piss off Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin, just almost like the JC Horn going to Carolina instead of the Saints.
Yeah, I wish he had more long speed, but as long as he gets his hands on a guy, then he's golden. So just stay impressed, man.
Yep. And then you picked for the Lions at 18 as well.
Yeah. So I know this is early. We did no trades. I would ideally move back so that someone could take a tackle here. But I mean, you just got to take your guys when you're drafting. And my guy is Keanu Benton, defensive tackle from Wisconsin. He just possesses so much power and moves so well for a guy his size, allows you to do so much more on your defensive line. Pairing him with Aleem McNeil is legitimately my wet dream. I know it's early. I don't care. He's my guy. His play will make it worth it.
Yeah, I feel like this is the type of pick where this pick happens in the first round of the draft and everybody's like, oh my God, I can't believe the Lions would do this. SOL, blah, 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 blah. And then like we talked about him on the My Guys podcast.
Yeah.
He just makes the entire front seven better just by being out there and taking up blocks.
Yeah. If you have him next to Aleem McNeil, how are you running up the middle at all? You're not. Both those guys require two blockers.
Think about what that does for like Hutch and for Pascal, who's going to be coming along. Yeah. I don't hate it. I also went D-line for the next pick. Next is Tampa at 19. I went with a D lineman who's almost the opposite of Keanu Neal.
He's legitimately the opposite.
And that's Kalijah Cansey, D lineman out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
He's more of like a speed pass rushing kind of
Yeah.
defensive lineman than like a run stopping. But man, I really like that next to Vita Vea
Yeah. I
for
mean,
Tampa Bay.
I don't know that he can stay on the field during like obvious running situations, but hey, on obvious passing downs, the
Bring him
guy's
in,
gonna
baby.
eat. He's gonna eat. And you know what? This late in the draft, like a pass rushing specialist is like that's still very valuable. So
Yeah, Tampa was another team I had a hard time picking for because I feel like they're a team who went from winning a Super Bowl a couple of years ago to just having so many needs,
yep.
like so many. And there's a couple guys here I could see them taking, but I like that one. I also picked for Seattle at
Mhm.
21. I feel like they're not actually 21. I think this is where Miami's pick gets skipped because
Yeah.
they tried to cheat. Don't ever forget that
Yes.
Miami tried to cheat and they lost their first round pick because of it.
With Tom Brady.
I feel like Tom set them up. Like this was his revenge for all the times he lost in
Mhm.
Miami. But I picked Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia.
Yeah.
Um, this could end up being a huge steal for Seattle, which like,
Yeah.
oh, Seattle getting a defensive steal late in the first round. Shocker. I mean, blazing speed for an edge rusher. What did he run? Like a sub 4.40
Yeah, it was
at the
4-3
combine,
something.
4.38 or something like that.
Yeah.
Jesus. Uh, I think he's going to be too tantalizing for someone to fall this far.
Hmm.
But, if he's here, I see Seattle being like, okay, we got Stroud with our first pick. We got our quarterback of the future. Let's work on the D that really struggled near the end of last season.
Yeah. I mean, I could see them maybe going with someone beefier, but I could like, man, they love their flashy, hyper athletic players and just molding them. And like he fits the bill. I also think they've been moving more in a direction of taking less character risks. Really, since Malik McDowell and Nolan Smith fits the bill there. Like he was the leader of the entire Georgia football team pretty much the entire time he was there. Might need a bit of like refinement as like an edge rusher if that's going to be like the set role that you're going to put him in rather than moving him around a lot. But like the dude's going to put in work and he's proven that he can also defend the run even at his lighter frame. So I think he's going to be a guy who makes himself pan out in the NFL regardless.
Yeah, it's such a Seattle pick. But you are up with the Chargers.
This was a point where I kind of looked at the big board and I was like, Christian Gonzalez probably should have gone like 10 picks ago. And realized that the value there was just too big. Obviously, there's other needs on that roster as well, but like they don't not need cornerback help. And getting the most physically gifted cornerback in the entire draft at 21 is, or I guess technically 22, right? That's huge. Brandon Staley does like to mix up like wild zone coverages, so he's a scheme fit. The kid from Oregon is actually a perfect fit for them. Um, I don't expect him to go this low. I actually wouldn't be shocked if they moved up and went and got him.
Yeah, and they really need corner help because JC Jackson turns out he's not great outside of New England.
Yeah,
He was
happens a lot.
rough last season. Yeah, it's amazing how that happens. So I have Baltimore next, and I was really tempted to take Zay Flowers here for Lamar Jackson. But if you read
Yep.
all the rumors, I think that DeAndre Hopkins trade is happening soon. Uh, I think they end up getting him. They just spent big money on Odell Beckham Jr. So I think it's going to be hard for them to like trade for a receiver. They got to pay a bunch of money, pay
Yep.
another receiver a bunch of money, and then have like Mandrews and Bateman and totally ignore the defense because that's just like not a very Baltimore thing to do.
No.
So I had them taking Deontay Banks, the corner from Maryland. Corner is an obvious need for them right now. And Deontay Banks is probably like the second highest guy left on my board at this point, maybe only behind Zay Flowers. But I like it. I like the physicality for a Baltimore defense that likes to be physical with receivers. Like I feel like that's a good fit for them, and he's not going far from where he played his college ball.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fit there. A guy who plays as aggressively at cornerback as Deontay Banks does is perfect for Baltimore. And he's a guy who kind of learns and tries to adapt to what he can get away with. So I don't think he's going to be a flag machine like Rock Ya-Sin, but he definitely fits the Ravens mentality.
Yep. And you are up with Minnesota. Somehow, like you got
Yeah.
all the picks for the teams that we don't like. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
You did the Bears, the Packers, and the Vikings.
Yeah. I could have gone a few different ways here for Minnesota. Ideally, if I could trade, I would have tried to find someone at the very beginning of the second round to trade back for and just take Bijan there. Because I'm not taking him in the first round. And that solves the Dalvin Cook problem going forward. They kind of need someone else at wide receiver. Uh, Justin Jefferson is incredible, but you need more than one receiver. And I have seen enough of TJ Hawkinson to know that he is not necessarily someone that you can rely on for 17 games. So, I went out and got wide receiver Zay Flowers. Dude's an absolute burner. Despite being on the smaller side, he is an outside wide receiver. He can play in the slot. So you have that versatility, but you are not just drafting a slot receiver here. He offers a lot, and I don't want to face Justin Jefferson paired with Zay Flowers because that sounds bad.
I think about what Flowers could do with Jefferson opening up the field for him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh God, like we let Flowers fall too far.
Yep.
uh so I have Jacksonville next. I mean, if you're Jacksonville, the name of the game is protect Trevor Lawrence at all
Mm-hmm.
cost. I thought about Steve Avila, the guard from TCU. But I think they need another tackle, and they definitely need a tackle of the future. So I went for
Yeah.
someone who I think could be a good developmental tackle for them in Anton Harrison, the tackle from Oklahoma. Like we said earlier, the class kind of falls off after Broderick Jones, but I do think he's someone that they could turn into a pretty good player. And if you're not protecting Lawrence, I don't know what you're doing at this point.
I'm still pretty comfortable with Anton Harrison. He's shown enough for me to expect him to adapt to the NFL and be at the very least like a quality pass protector um pretty early on. There's like one more left that I'm comfortable with in the first round. There's another beyond that I expect to go in the first round, but wouldn't personally take there. But yeah, I mean, like after that, like it falls off real hard.
Yeah. You're up with the Giants.
The Giants have agreed to move forward with Danny Dimes, seeing as Danny Dimes is Danny Dimes. I feel like the best way to circumvent that is continue to give him weapons. So I decided to take tight end Dalton Kincaid. I don't expect him to go in the first round because he had a medical flag. Um, but I don't have any information about what the medical flag is. So depending on what it is, obviously it could change whether or not um, I would actually take him. But I mean, he's easily the best pass catching tight end in this class. You're not going to line him up in line a lot for run blocking, but you split him out, put him in the slot. He's just a problem for defenses. And if you got a quarterback with limitations, best thing you can do is create problems for the defense.
Yeah, Kincaid was one of my guys, and I actually feel like this is maybe the perfect spot for him because he needs to go somewhere where they're going to use him creatively. And if any coach is going to get creative on offense, is going to be Brian Daboll. I also like he's not an inline tight end like we talked about. He's more of like a guy that's going to be out wide. He's going to play H back. He's going to like be a move blocker. And the Giants do a lot of that stuff. They need someone that has that skill set to be in that role for them. I feel like he could be a big asset to their offense right away. So I had the Cowboys next. And I feel like in actuality, what would happen in this scenario is that they would take Bijan Robinson. I just feel like that's a very Cowboys thing to do, is to like take the superstar running back from Texas, even though Tony Pollard was amazing last season.
Yeah.
But I have them doing something a little wiser here and taking Brian Brees, the defensive lineman from Clemson. D-line was a bit of an issue for the Cowboys last year, so they're trying to address that. And Brees was another dude who his stock was much, much higher coming into the college football season. And he wasn't as good during college football season this year as people thought. So his stock has fallen. But like at one point, he was going to be like a top 10 pick in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
So the talent's there, the pedigree's there. And I think it's a nice addition to their defense, kind of putting him in the middle of that defensive line and having him kind of move around, play a little like outside on the defensive line, inside on the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
He could do quite a few things for them. So I like that as another piece for that defense. But next up was another team that we hate. I think Dallas was the first team that we don't like that I had to pick for, but I guess not really a team that you hate, a team that I don't like, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, for obvious reasons. I watched the Buffalo Bills lose in the playoffs, and it was very evident they had zero depth left on their defensive line. They had no one to stop the run. So I went out and got them a defensive tackle from Michigan named Mozzie Smith that will stop the run. He is incredibly strong and incredibly quick for his size. During the combine, he did 22 reps on the bench press, except he didn't do 225 like everyone else. He did 325.
He is a beast. I also watched Buffalo lose in the playoffs this past season. I feel like one of us enjoyed that much more than the other one. But so I have the team that beat Buffalo with the next pick, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals. Don't overthink it. Let's make it easy. We got to protect Joe Burrow, right? Yeah. They got Orlando Brown Jr. in the offseason to play left tackle. They were going to shift Jonah Williams over to right tackle. And now he's a little bit upset about that and wants a trade. So you're going to need a tackle. It's not my favorite spot in the draft for another tackle, but I went with DeJuan Jones, the tackle out of Ohio State. This dude is an absolute unit at the tackle position. He's got some skill stuff he needs to work on, but like the size and the physicality is certainly there because he is huge. But yeah, they got to protect Burrow. Like that's the name of the game. It's been the name of the game ever since they got him. So just keep doing that.
Yeah, it's really interesting that they haven't figured that out yet because everyone knew it before they drafted him.
I feel like they're figuring it out now because they've spent a lot of assets on offensive line each of the last two off seasons. But like
not successfully.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You just need to keep doing it. Like, just keep spending the assets on offensive line until it works out.
It
Because the
was like
rest
they
of
spend assets, but like not like really committing to it. It's like half committed to it.
no, that's why I'm saying go all
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Just keep protecting him until it works because that's like the Achilles heel of this team right now. But you're up at 29 with the New Orleans Saints.
I thought about getting another weapon here for Derek Carr, but at this slot, it's no one that I love. I mean, maybe Jalen Hyatt, but he pretty much hasn't run routes his entire college career. So like could be a minute until he's up to speed. So I went the next best route to help out the quarterback that you just remade the entire world to make fit on your roster. Shore up the interior offensive line a little bit. I went with Steve Avila. It's probably the best guard in this draft. I'm remembering correctly, TCU, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's really where like their offensive line is struggling is guard and center. And that is the last place you want your pressure coming from. If you are going to invest in getting someone like Derek Carr, you had better damn sure make sure that he's on his feet and has weapons.
So my last pick, I have the Philadelphia Eagles again at 30. Like I mentioned earlier, when I took Brian Branch at 10 for them, they lost a lot of starters on defense, like 2 linebackers, a safety, other like lots of guys who contributed to their Super Bowl run last year. So I'm going to replace one of the linebackers with my favorite linebacker in this draft. I know people have Drew Sanders as the number 1 linebacker, but I am going Jack Campbell, linebacker out of Iowa, another one of my guys. They have a really good pass rush in Philly. Tons of sacks last year, so they don't really have to worry about the fact that he's not like an explosive pass rusher, but he's like a sideline to sideline dude. He's going to cover. He's going to make a lot of tackles on that defense, especially with that front line and how good it is clearing the way for him. Like, I think that's a perfect spot for him. And I think like the coverage and the versatility you're adding between Brian Branch and Jack Campbell is something that could potentially lead you like on another Super Bowl run next year, considering all the guys that they're bringing back on both sides of the ball. And then the last pick in the first round, Matt, tell them who Kansas City got. This pisses me off.
Yeah. So we fucked up. I gave them wide receiver Quentin Johnson from TCU. Obviously, he's a big receiver. He's got massive yak ability for his size. While he's a big receiver, he doesn't win contested catches and he's got drop issues. Quentin Johnson's got some warts that could make him into a bust, but if any quarterback is going to make a receiver who was dropping like I think it was around like 12% of his targets suddenly not have drop issues, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it's just funny how much fit and draft slot change player evaluation.
Yeah.
Because like if Quentin Johnston were to go to the Saints, I'd just be like, it's a nice pick. Is it really going to work out with Derek Carr? We'll see.
Yeah.
He doesn't do the big receiver stuff. Great. He goes to Kansas City, and I'm just like, gosh darn it. Gosh darn it. This guy is going to be 1,000 yards a season, multiple touchdowns, huge plays in the Kansas City offense with his yards after the catch ability. Like,
yeah, it's funny because like the things that they would probably ask him to do there is weirdly enough like a lot of the stuff that they asked Tyreek Hill to do.
Yeah, it's the big rumor with the Chiefs right now is that they're trying to trade up and they're targeting either Zay Flowers or Jamar Gibbs.
Yeah.
And it's like both those guys, they go there, they're automatically going to be the number 2 pick in your dynasty fantasy football draft. Like whoever goes there is just going to be like the dude. Also, real quick, just wanted to mention that we talked about the odds of run over 1.5 running backs going in the first round last week. We
Yeah.
took that bet at plus 400. It's down to minus 190 now. So I hope you guys jumped on some of those bets with us last week because some of the odds have nosedived
Yeah.
since we bet those. Like I had Josh Downs to go in the first round. They did open the first round market on
Yeah.
DraftKings. I think you can still get what was it, Keon White?
Yeah.
He's like
I
plus
think it's like,
110.
yeah.
Jalen Hyatt's out there. Like there's
So
still a lot of guys you can get, but I took Josh Downs at like plus 800 and he's down to like plus 200 now.
I was a bit disappointed when I looked at it that Corey Trice isn't on there because Corey Trice is very, very reminiscent to Tariq Woolen, and the NFL is a copycat league. I would
Yeah.
not be surprised if one of those teams in the last 10 picks of the first round just takes a swing at him.
Yeah. So if you're going to bet on the draft before tonight, this is coming out on Thursday. The draft is tonight. I think that first round market still has an incredible amount of value in it. Um, some of the guys that we took in our draft, like Steve Avila's plus 140,
Yeah.
Jalen Hyatt and Josh Downs are plus 250. BJ Ojolari is plus 310
Yeah.
for a dude who was like a big time prospect at one point. Like there's some value out there. But
Yeah, I actually might take that. Like he I mean, the tackle run might push him out of the first round, but I have a hard time. I mean, I obviously he didn't make it in ours, but I certainly considered him a number of times.
yeah, I took a bunch of guys. I have like 15 open bets for the first round tomorrow. So we'll be back next week to tell you guys how that went. And we're going to break down the first round and give our opinions of the picks, the draft classes. We'll really go through the whole draft next week. But
Yeah.
for now, that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter, especially during the NFL draft at Matador_defense. And you can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Matt, my friend, enjoy the first round tomorrow. I'm sure we will be talking throughout the weekend as the picks roll in. But Christmas time's finally here, man. It's like late Wednesday night right now. This is coming out on a Thursday, and we're going to start picking guys soon. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, I cannot be held responsible for the things that I say and tweet during the NFL draft. That is legally binding.
The only other thing I want to say: Kings Warriors Game 5 in about an hour. De'Aaron Fox playing with the broken finger. Light the beam, baby. Let's go. This time, when we get back to record this podcast next week, the Kings may or may not be playing basketball. So, hell of a season. Super proud of them, no matter what the outcome is. But let's do it. Let's beat these guys. I hate Golden State.
You got that dog in them.
So, all right, my friend. I will see you soon.
Yep. Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Robin.
Bye, man.